truly incredible video. Just look at these plumes of smoke, as well as a massive blaze. This was a scene in Iran overnight after Israel struck nuclear and military facilities, as well as targeted key Iranian leaders. In fact, 3 of Iran's most powerful men were killed, including its highest-ranking military officer. Iran's supreme leader vowing to retaliate, and it seems that that's already begun. In fact, Israel's military says that it's currently intercepting drones launched from Iran. You see some live pictures right now over Israel where residents there have been warned to take measures as a state of emergency is in effect. Those residents preparing to shelter in place if necessary. Israel says that it has used over 200 jets to strike over 100 targets in Iran. Iranian media says that the strikes killed at least 6 Iranian nuclear scientists, in addition to the people we just mentioned. Earlier, Israel's ambassador to the UN told CNN that the strikes were an act of self-defense.
Prime Minister Netanyahu was very clear. We took a preemptive attack to defend ourselves, and we are targeting the nuclear facilities and the ballistic missile centers in Iran. So we don't go into declarations now, we take actions. We decided not to wait for Iran to attack us with nuclear capabilities. We knew that they were plotting to do that. And while they were talking with many countries and negotiating, they moved secretly with a military plan to attack Israel. And what we did was an act of self-defense.
And then there's this. CNN has just learned that the strikes hit Iran's main uranium enrichment facility and came just days before scheduled nuclear talks with the U.S., which may potentially be up in the air. Those talks, they were set to take place on Sunday in Oman. No indication if those plans have changed, though I wouldn't be surprised. Well, the U.S. has issued a security alert urging embassy employees and American citizens in Israel to shelter in place until further notice. This as Israel continues to launch strikes against Iran and Tehran begins to retaliate. The warning coming as the Trump administration is trying to distance itself from those attacks. In fact, in a statement on X shortly after the first round of strikes, Secretary of State Marco Rubio stressed that Israel took, quote, unilateral action against Iran with no U.S. involvement. Rubio stressed that the administration's top priority is protecting the U.S. forces and the assets in place in the region. I'm joined now by Stephen Cook, Senior Fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council of Foreign Relations. It's so good to have you, Stephen.
My pleasure.
I should also mention you're the author of The End of Ambition, America's Past, Present, and Future in the Middle East. Stephen, let's get straight to some of the comments that you may have just heard right now from one of my previous guests, Gideon Levy. And he told me that it was his opinion that he did not see Israel carrying out this level of attack without some form of approval from the United States. Now, bearing in mind what we just heard and what I just shared with viewers right now that came from the Secretary of State, is stressing that this was unilateral action. Where do you believe that the United States stands when it comes to this round of strikes?
Well, it certainly is the case that President Trump has signaled over and over again that he wants a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear program, whereas Israel has said no solution is possible as long as the Iranians can enrich uranium. So there is a difference between the two. But of course, the Israelis did inform the United States that this operation was going to happen. And as a result, it is entirely possible that the president either blessed it or said, you're on your own. But at the same time, there's a tremendous amount of security cooperation between Israel and the United States. And it is possible once it was underway that the United States offered intelligence support to the Israelis as the operation unfolded. Of course, when it comes to the defense of Israel, certainly the United States would be in the background providing support to the Israeli Air Force and Israeli forces as they contend with incoming drone strikes or ballistic missile strikes.
And in the days leading to these missile strikes, we know that President Trump, not just privately, but certainly publicly, said that he was hoping that there would be some restraint from Israel as these talks were ongoing. Now, to be clear, we don't have any indication that those plans have changed. But as I said a moment ago, we wouldn't be surprised if they do. So do you think that the president in the U.S. still has a chance of getting these sides to the negotiating table after what we just saw the last few hours and what has been promised in the hours and days ahead?
I think it's quite unlikely that the Iranians are going to show up for talks this coming weekend, especially as Israeli journalists are reporting that there was full coordination between the United States and Israel, and that, in fact, the United States and Israel were engaged in a rather elaborate deception campaign that made this attack more effective than it otherwise would be. But even so, even if it is the case that, as we know publicly, that the Trump administration is distancing itself from the attacks, it strikes me that the Iranians are going to be more concerned about retaliation against Israel, as well as threatened retaliation against the United States for Israel's attack, than they are going to be interested in negotiating a deal with the United States.
Stephen, you wrote the book on the future in the Middle East, quite literally, as we just said a short while ago. So help us look into the future. What does this conflict, this campaign, this war really look like in the next 24 to 48 hours for the people in Israel and those in Iran?
Well, it certainly is the case that there are going to be strikes and counterstrikes. It really depends on how effective Israel's initial blows really were. There was an attempt to decapitate Iran's armed forces, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to destroy its nuclear infrastructure as well as its nuclear scientists. So the question remains whether Iran really has the capacity any longer to strike in ways that will deal a major blow to Israel. If they do, there are going to be multiple rounds of Israeli strikes and Iranian counterstrikes. If they don't, we are really genuinely in a new era where the Islamic Republic has been defanged. We really won't know that for the next couple of days or so, how the Iranians can respond and what the Israelis are going to do. But there is the real possibility that this has been a paradigm shift in the region, where Israel has done a tremendous amount of damage, not just to Iran's proxies, but to Iran itself.
No doubt we are at a critical crossroads, Stephen Cook, and we're so happy that you were able to join us to offer some great perspective. Thank you.